February 16th, 2025. This is my review of my reading of Numbers chapter 8 and chapter 9, 1 through 14, and also Leviticus chapters 1, 2, and 3. The things that stuck out to me were that the Levites were dedicated to the Lord in place of all the firstborn sons of Israel. Before it said that all the firstborn sons of Israel were to be dedicated to the Lord and sacrifice to the Lord, but you would buy back your children, the firstborn sons, the baby. You'd buy that back from the Lord by sacrificing an animal in its place, either a young bull or a young goat, free of any defects, or a bird, and that ceremony must have continued on because they even did that for Jesus, and they did the what was a partridge? Anyway, Jesus parents didn't have any money at the time when he was born, so they did the bird thing, and they didn't have a young bull or a goat or a sheep, a lamb to offer in his place. And I'm screwing that up, I know, but that's essentially the idea behind it. The other thing that was interesting to me, well, let's kind of stick on that thought for a minute. In place of all the firstborn sons of Israelites, so Levites were set apart, dedicated to serve in the temple and to work at the sacrifices. They didn't own land. They didn't own property. They had things donated to them for the service that they did. They did the service in the temple. They did the sacrifices, which was a lot of work, especially with the amount of people there was. It would take a lot of work and to go through that, to offer them. So they would, and with a lot of people, there was a lot of animals to sacrifice, and so they therefore partook in the animals and the grain offerings. That's how they survived and how they prospered, was through that. But then for purification, they shaved their entire body. That was kind of interesting. And then they were also sprinkled with the holy water, basically the water of purification, actually said. That was interesting to me. Then we had the young bull for them and a grain offering that was offered for them. Each person would bring that. Each Levite would bring that and offer them up. And then the people of Israel would lay their hands on them, and raising hands, Aaron must present the Levites to the Lord as a special offering. Again, laying on of hands and raising hands. Let's see, and the Levites stand in front of Aaron and his sons and raise their hands and present them as a special offering to the Lord. In this way, you will set the Levites apart from the rest of the people of Israel. We get that he claimed Israelites. Yep, that's the part I highlighted there. We talked about that. Make sacrifices to purify the people, so no plague would strike them. So it took the sacrifice, which now we have Jesus as the ultimate sacrifice to prevent plagues and things. They must begin serving in the temple at the age of 25, and they must retire at the age of 50. So 25 years of service in the temple, which is strange to me, because then, how does that work? I was looking for other examples, but I know in the case of John the Baptist, Elizabeth was mom, Zechariah was dad. They were both well in age, but Zacharias served in the temple, and actually was in the Holy of Holies when he heard from God, from the angel Gabriel, and he lost his speech. And he was, I'm thinking he was above 50. Maybe he wasn't, but that was my guess based on the terminology that they had there. I could be completely wrong in that. Something to think about. Maybe he was less than 50, but I thought there was another instance where there was somebody up in age. Well, after that we see Simeon, but he's only serving in the temple, and you could still serve as a guard there in those cases. According to this, Levites over 50 they may still assist their fellow Levites by serving as guards in the tabernacle, but they may not officiate in the service. That's how we assign duties to the Levites. Those are the Levites. So I wonder, is that some sort of guideline as well for pastors? I don't think so. I see a lot of pastors that are still well anointed, further on in their age, and they're still serving quite well in their age. So I don't know if that really means anything as far as that goes. And in Old Testament, New Testament, there's definitely some separation. There's some things that we see there that are examples and shadows of things to come, not necessarily laws for now. But to look at the lens of the Old Testament through the New Testament, and knowing that Jesus made everything in the Old Testament perfect. See, the other part that got to me was that second sacrifice, that if anybody had to miss the first sacrificial Passover because they were ceremoniously unclean, or they were on a journey, even there was concessions made for them to not be able to partake in that, which then you could get into that whole legalism of, well, I was on a journey, I'll do it next month, or who's got to track that. And I could see where that led to the whole, well, you didn't do this, you're kicked out, that whole process, the Pharisaical process, because of the way this is written, the way it's set up. And again, this is a shadow of what's to come. Jesus is the perfect sacrifice. Is the dedication that we have is not done by ceremonies. It's done through our hearts, through Jesus, to Jesus in our heart. That direct relationship. We are baptized into Jesus through his blood. We're no longer in need of the sacrifices in this way. It's so perfect and so awesome. The other thing that got me here is, I kind of was looking at this, and if foreigners living among you want to celebrate the Passover of the Lord, they must follow these same decrees and regulations. The same laws apply to both native-born Israelites and to foreigners living among you. I was looking to see, early on, or a while back anyway, I was looking for this passage to kind of see, did the Israelites get this wrong from the get-go? Is that why? I mean, Jesus includes everyone, the Jew and the Gentile. Paul's pretty clear on that. But in here, should have the Israelites been looking to accept those people? God gave them specific instructions, which we'll see later as we read, to drive out the people in those areas and not to associate with them, basically to not take on their gods and their habits of that, because God wants us to only worship him alone, and not be drawn in by these foreign gods, or actually it's not foreign gods, is what it is. It's Satan masquerading and trying to present himself as a deity to get people to worship anything but God. And that's where God's warning us against, is don't worship anything but me. So that's what I see there. But I've wondered about that. Should have the Israelites been looking to, when people wanted to say, or being accepting of foreigners, look, you have to follow our customs. You have to be circumcised and offer sacrifices and live like we do, and follow our God, because we're worshiping. This is the one true God. And did they have a way to bring people into the fold that maybe they should have more, as opposed to, they were the chosen ones. They were ones set apart. So anyway, there was that. And then we get into Leviticus, and we see over and over again that repetition of how they were supposed to offer the sacrifice of the burnt offering, the free, animal free of defects, laying on the hand of the animal's head, and the Lord will accept its death in place to purify you and making you right with him, being him God. That's what it took. That was that sacrifice, that blood sacrifice that an animal had to take to pay the price for sin that was renewed year after year. They would have to a new animal killed and died. Now we have the perfect sacrifice of God, Jesus, on the cross, that perfect sacrifice. And we see this repetition, how that had to be carried out. The procedure for the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, how that was supposed to go. But a couple little glimmers of things. No yeast. You didn't want to use any leavened bread, and that's because no yeast or honey may be burned. Also, season all your grain offerings with salt to remind you of God's eternal covenant. Never forget to add salt to your grain offerings. And present your grain offering to the Lord from your first portion of your harvest. But add the salt. And the other part was you must never eat any fat or blood. The blood parts I get, but the fat, come on, that's the best part. Anyway, that's what I was seeing in my reading today from that. Pretty cool anyway. Woo!